I'm not the type of investor that's going to be like, oh, you went to this school, you worked at this company, you're awesome. That doesn't say much to me. I can look at the team by talking to them, by understanding their past, their history. I want to invest in founders that have overcome hardship.
We have sound effects too, by the way. Rebecca Danta from Miami Angels.
I feel like I'm entering the basketball court.
Welcome to the show. I'm still learning. All right, so let's jump into it. Rebecca, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I'm honored to be selected to be a guest.
Oh, no, of course. It's great to have you here. And I think it's an awesome time to have you here because it's like super crazy what's happening in Miami.
Yeah.
For folks that don't know, you are the managing director at Miami Angels. Real quick, before we get into all this nuttiness that's happening, tell us a little bit about you, Miami Angels, and what it's all about.
Awesome. So a little bit about my personal story is that I'm born and raised in Miami, in the suburbs. I say that because it's a very different perspective than what we're seeing now, especially. People say Miami natives are so rare. Like, I don't think they're rare because
I get that same thing all the time. Like when my wife and I met, she's like, "Where are you from?" Like, Miami. She's like, "No. Where are you from?" Like, from Miami. I'm born and raised here. She's like, you're the first person I've ever met that's been born and raised in Miami. I'm like, that's really weird.
There's a lot of us.
All of my friends are born and raised in Miami.
Exactly.
Right? So here's one of them right here, Brian. Right. So, so I feel you.
Yeah, so I went to school at University of Florida in Central Florida, so I spent time away then. Then I came back to Miami after college. I started in the executive development program at Macy's, and I was just feeling demotivated in my career. I was here in Miami, and I wanted to do something different. I was like, I want to get a job in tech. I didn't really know what that meant or what I was doing. But the foresight I had was I want to do something that has a lot more upside. Yep. So I moved to New York, got a job at General Assembly. That was an amazing time for my career. The colleagues I work with, they've gone on to be partners at VC firms. They've started companies, raised venture capital.
And what year was this when you joined GA?
2014.
So that was like right when kind of GA was getting going.
Yeah,
right?
So they pivoted from co-working space to the boot camp model in 2013. So I was there right around the seed round through, so we were multiple rounds of fundraising, insane growth. It was like 7 cities we were in when I started. Probably it was closer to 30 by the time I left. So it was a really neat period to see the fast growing startup. I lived the hustle life in New York. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment that we converted in a 3-bedroom. I had a curtain for a door. So that represents New York. It's very much career oriented. Sure. And when I left Miami for New York, I was very much like, Miami has no opportunities. I was a Miami hater. I was like, there's nothing here. I need to leave. And then when I got to New York, that was really the first time that I appreciated Miami. I was like, oh, home is actually awesome. And so 3 years there, decided to move back. But I didn't know what was happening in Miami. I think now for the first time we're doing a good job of telling our story.
Yeah. But
before that, unless you were like in the tech bubble, you were at the time, but you were heads down building your company.
Yeah.
I didn't know about anything. I just knew like Uber and Lyft were here, but obviously those are national startups that just open offices. And I saw the job at Miami Angels. I've said this story a few times now, so many people know I reached out to Raul cold on LinkedIn, didn't really know what I was doing. But it did feel like a risk coming to Miami Angels because I was going from like a really high growth, I'm going from an operating role at a startup to investor. It was different. So it was another career change. Like started in retail management, startup operations, VC. And I think since this is the Lessons for Leaders podcast, the cold email thing is a theme in my, I talk about it a lot. I talk about how founders should do it. I talk about how investors should respond to cold emails.
So you're all pro cold email everything, right?
So it's not if you can get a warm intro, yes, you absolutely should, but don't let it stop you. Now, write a good cold email. We get plenty of terrible cold emails. And I hate when investors say, I only talk to founders if they come through my network. Right. That's so arrogant. Right. Not all founders can have the network to have access to you. So we've invested in companies that we've gotten through cold emails before. Amazing. And we make it a point to respond to the ones that are well thought out. That's awesome. And I see a lot of investors also talk about some of their most fruitful investments stem from a cold email, right? So you see, I think the mindset is shifting where folks before would only respond to warm introductions. Now it seems like I think investors are turning the tide a little bit, right? Yeah, because I think they're seeing that, the whole thing about, it's a pipeline issue, we can't invest in diverse founders. They may just not have access to your network. So you need to find ways to get closer to them. Yep, definitely. Totally agree. So Miami Angels in a nutshell. So really quickly, like 30,000 foot level, describe what it is and how it operates. Yeah, so Miami Angels is a syndicate of over 100 angel investors. More plainly said, it's a membership organization formed for the purpose of investing in startups. Mm-hmm. The way that we do it is we the staff source the deal, and then through a mix of us and members, we select the top companies, and they present through a monthly pitch night. So for angel investors, people love the pitch night experience because it's very interactive. It's very community focused. People get to ask questions to entrepreneurs. It's not like a typical demo day either, where you're just hearing a quick pitch. Like, these are highly vetted and sourced opportunities by this point. And then we have a membership discussion about the deals where it's moderated. So for people too who are more new to the asset class, it's a great opportunity to learn. And then people who just love talking about deals, like, there's nothing better than that. Right, exactly. So it's basically a membership model. So there's a fee. Yeah, right? So we don't take carrier management. Members pay annual dues to get access, and there's no mandatory deals. Some angel groups do that, but we believe if you join us, it's your decision if you want to invest or not. Okay. However, we're very clear that we're not a networking group, so we don't want people to join who just want to meet others. Right, exactly. Because it's a no-brainer if people are like, hey, Miami Angels, why not join? I'll get things to look at. I don't have to invest. But really, you want some skin in the game, right? You want to see that people are committed to at least making a deal within a certain period of time, right? Yeah, and that's we have to invest, of course, to get good deal flow. Right. So I always say the network is a great side benefit. 100 people in the group. It's made up of high net worth individuals. It's made up of investors. Like, most of the VCs in Miami are members, and don't laugh because there's more now than before. Yep. People are always like, there's like 2. What are you talking about? There's more. Yeah, for sure. Members, professional angel investors and entrepreneurs. A really cool thing that's happening in the kind of Miami life cycle is that more entrepreneurs are joining now. Like, the people who started their companies in 2014, 2015, now have some capital to invest, and it's really cool and full circle to see them joining. Yeah, like I was just telling you before we started recording, I actually just made my first angel investment in a local South Florida company that I'm really excited about. So I definitely want to look into becoming a member and do more deals and things like that. So that's one where I'm not able to put in tons of capital, but it feels really damn good to support an entrepreneur at the beginning of their journey, especially because I'm not far removed from that journey. And I'm also insanely considering doing that journey again on a new venture. But it just feels good if you're able to participate a little bit in those initial phases. Yeah, and we talked about how it's not quite as overwhelming as it seems on the outside. Yep. So at Miami Angels, the minimum check size is $10,000. We have a lot of, like I said, we're a mix in the group. So we do have the professional angel investors and the VC funds that are writing bigger checks, but we also have people that are writing a couple $1,000 to $2,000 to $3,000, $10,000 checks a year. Yep. They're people that are executives in Miami. And what we've said is, hey, take a portion of your net worth and put it in this asset class. And it's a way to give back, learn, and also hopefully a great return on your investment. Yeah, definitely. And what I've done is, again, I've
I've always kind of felt like, again, because as a startup entrepreneur, I always like, yeah, I'll be angel investing when I have $1 billion in the bank, or I have a huge exit. You don't really need that much. You said $10,000, relatively speaking, could be a lot of money to a lot of people.
Exactly.
But for folks that, let's say, are playing in the stock market, they have some money allocated there, it makes a lot of sense to say, hey, diversify your portfolio a little bit, especially if you're involved in the local scene. Take some maybe out of the public markets and into some of these early stage ventures.
Yeah.
I'm doing it also because I want to learn also the
Yeah.
early stage investing side of things as well. And I know you guys provide a lot of education about that, right?
Yeah. No better way to learn than doing.
Exactly.
But the other thing is that, doing it through an angel group is, one, it's really hard to see enough deals.
Right.
So
Deal flow is key.
exactly. And then knowing to source it, and then the other benefit in Miami Angels is groupthink can be good and bad sometimes.
Right.
We always encourage people to ultimately go with what they think and believe, but you can rely on someone's expertise. Like, let's say it's a healthcare tech deal. You don't know a lot about that, but we have someone who's been investing in that space for the last 15 years, and they're talking about why they're going to invest in it.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense. So how does it work as far as like, how do you select the companies? Like, what parameters are you looking for? All that stuff, just like the nuances of the decision-making process.
So the first review is if it's a fit for our thesis, which is early stage, meaning once in a while we'll do pre-revenue, has to be the right founder, a very much untapped market. There's a few a year that we do, but really we're playing more in the products on the market, just starting to generate revenue. And one thing that a lot of people don't know, I think this has also been accelerated by the pandemic, but we actually look at deals all throughout the U.S., not only Miami. And that is because, so we're very much like Miami group. All of our investors are in South Florida. We're focused on supporting Miami startups, and they'll always get kind of like special attention and feedback.
Sure. Yep.
But to us, it's a win to have returns for local investors as well to keep investing here. So we looked throughout the U.S. with a focus on the Southeast, and part of that change was before having someone fly in for the pitch. It was a big ask, a high bar, and now we're doing everything on Zoom.
Right.
It won't always be that way, but it just geography in so many things in life we've seen is no longer such a barrier.
Exactly. Everything's like, it seems most investors are becoming fully location agnostic.
Exactly.
At this point, right?
Yeah. So before we would hear a lot like, for us to, we only invest in the Bay Area in New York, or you need to open up an office in the Bay Area. It happened with Nearpod. I think it would just be so ridiculous to say that now.
Yeah. You can't really, you're going to lose out on a lot of deals as an investor if you're not subscribing to the thesis where opportunity is everywhere and location doesn't matter as much anymore, right? I think we're far away from the mentality that you needed to be in a radius of Stanford, or up in the Northeast, the computer science degrees and all that stuff are happening there. Entrepreneurship is happening everywhere. It's all democratized. You can start companies and scale them anywhere. So totally agree with that. So what are the requirements from an investor to join Miami Angels? You need to be an accredited investor, right?
Yeah. So accredited, and that's actually changed.
Okay.
So most people qualify for accredited investor under the income threshold, which is 200,000 in annual income in the last few years, or 300,000 in household income.
Okay.
Or the assets threshold, which is 1 million in assets outside your primary residence.
Okay.
But the SEC received a lot of criticism, and fairly so, saying like, what about people who just because you're wealthy doesn't mean that you have knowledge about investing? Because they say it's to protect people from getting into something that they don't know what they're doing. So they've now democratized it a bit. They've expanded the definition. So people, if you do show notes, I can send you the link. But people who have certain qualifications or certifications can now qualify, and as well as people who assets under management, if you reach a certain threshold, but you're not like in the accredited investor as far as your personal wealth, you can now invest.
Okay.
So they're opening it up more, and it looks like in the coming years they'll continue to do that. So at Miami Angels, you do have to be an accredited investor to join. If you're not an accredited investor, there's some awesome crowdfunding websites where you can begin investing even for it, and that's also a good way to.
I see it was like Join Republic or like those kind of things, right? I forget the names of them exactly, but you can invest.
I believe
WeFunder is one of them, right? Seed Invest was another that actually I worked with them at Live Ninja. I don't know if they're still around, but that was another one.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So and we were talking about this, like Miami, again, managing director of Miami Angels, we can't get out of this conversation without talking about Miami and what's happening right now. It's an absolute explosion of energy, I would say, around this city. There's a lot of people moving here. I'm curious to get your thoughts on all this, like your perspective on all this excitement. Obviously, there's a lot of good things here. Do you feel this is a net positive? We got to embrace it. Do you feel what is the word, like optimistic or like cautiously optimistic about everything? Are you skeptical? What's Rebecca Danta's perspective on all this recent stuff that's happening?
Yeah, so what I'll say is that it definitely feels different this time around.
It does, yeah.
Since 2017, I was being introduced to people who were moving here. But back then, the people who were like leaving the Valley or New York for Miami were the contrarian thinkers.
Right.
It wasn't trending back then. And then you would also hear of people who of executives or VCs that had houses here, but it was very like hush hush. It was very much vacation.
Yep.
It wasn't out there. There were like rumors that we would talk about, like, oh, so-and-so's actually here. Did you know that? But not getting involved locally.
Right. Or so-and-so has a winter house here, right? He's got a $20 million house on North Bay Road that maybe he comes once a year and stays in, but it's really just an investment property, you know?
Exactly. So that was really the theme, that they were here, but not doing business here, and no interest to really do so. Yeah,
I totally agree with that. I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the special things about Miami is like we always felt like a rising tide lifts all ships. Like this was a very, very collaborative community. And that's what allowed us, I think, to get to this point was you sent an email to somebody that was like really involved, like Raul, for example. You would get a response, you know, they would point you in the right direction on where to go. It felt like there was a welcome mat always for the city of Miami. And I think that stemmed from a lot of folks like us that were born and raised here. We have this pride for this city as a welcoming city, and we want to see people come here and we want to include them in everything, and we want to get them integrated. The question is, how do we make sure the transplants that don't have that historical attachment to the city feel that same way and can also collaborate? I think that's going to be the big gap. And I'm also curious, in this post-COVID location agnostic world, how does having all this new money and excitement really impact Miami? I'm real as an entrepreneur at heart, I'm always optimistic, on the optimistic side about everything. I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be, right? But in this post-COVID world, what does it look like to, be based here, but still can invest anywhere? What does it look like to be based here and can hire all over the world? I'm excited. You see these companies like Pipe, for example, Harry Hurst company. There's like 8 Sleep, right? That it looks like they're crushing it.
Yeah.
I love all this stuff. I love all this excitement that's happening. There was another one, Bolt, right? That just announced like a $75 million Series C. The founder's based here in Miami, from Miami. My question is, with all this new capital coming in, can we expect new opportunities for jobs in Miami? Are we creating jobs, or are we still just like, we'll hire the best talent regardless of location? I think that it's a double-edged sword on both sides, and curious to get your thoughts on all this. I don't think we don't know because we've never experienced the post-COVID world before, but that's questions that I'm asking is what could possibly happen.
I don't know what that looks like for Miami for talent. My bet on what talent is going to look like in the future is that companies who are like, you have to be based here, are going to miss out on talent.
Definitely.
Luckily, the role we're hiring, I feel very fortunate that Miami's such a cool place right now because I do need our team to be in Miami.
Yeah.
So I'm the opposite of what
for sure.
I'm saying.
I mean, you want boots on the ground here in Miami for sure, because you really need to get involved with the community. It's different. Right?
Yeah, and So we're different. We're also not a startup. But I think the future is that you're going to very much miss out on talent.
Right.
If you're location based, because you're only going to get people who live in that city and want to come into an office every day, I think.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you hear a lot of people are like, we miss seeing people, we miss office. So it sounds like this is what Pipe is going for too, like these hubs, like understanding that people do want and need connection. So my bet on the future is the hybrid model.
Yeah.
And as far as Miami goes, just the fact that there's investors here it does validate our city as a legitimate tech hub. And everyone's saying this, and I do believe it to be true. It's our moment. So many people have worked hard for it. I don't consider myself a Miami tech OG. I started in 2017 in Miami tech. But I was given that welcoming kind of spirit, and I try to give that back to others. So when you ask, like, how can people see how we are, I think it's just being an example and continuing to pay it forward. Yeah,
definitely. And I think, again, if you're here, you'll really start to feel that energy, and I think you're right. I agree with you that the hybrid model is the future. I do like what Pipe is doing with this micro hub kind of concept. No better place for a micro hub than Miami, right? Because if you want to go to the office on Tuesdays but work from the beach on Wednesdays, if your company allows for that, I mean, this is a pretty damn good city to do that, right? And have that flexibility, right?
But I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah, please.
You being a Miami native, how do you feel about all the attention only going to, like, certain neighborhoods? The beach, Wynwood, Brickell.
Yeah, that's a thing that Miami has to figure out, I think, a little bit. I mean, we've always been a sprawled out city. We're not an urban dense city like San Francisco or Boston or New York, right?
Yeah.
You need a car in Miami. Mm-hmm. It's not like...
It's huge.
Yeah, public transportation still has a lot of work to be done as far as what we have access to. I do think that, we need to do a better job with... Especially if there's a lot of families moving here. You have Wynwood, you have the Design District in Midtown, and you have what Moshe Mana is building in downtown, which looks amazing, with Michelle Labs, which looks absolutely
She's killing it.
She's crushing it. Yep. Shout out to Michelle. I see all of these, and then you got like Brickell with Pipeline, and then you got the Grove, which could be amazing for a lot of companies, and South Miami, and then there's obviously what's happening in northern parts of the county. You have Magic Leap a little bit in Broward, and then there's, I think, boat setters in the Aventura area. They were in the Aventura area. I don't know where they are now.
Fort Lauderdale?
They're Fort Lauderdale, maybe, right. I think if we really want to capitalize on this momentum, we need to be what Silicon Valley is, where Silicon Valley is not just San Francisco, and if you make the equivalent of San Francisco and Miami, you have Palo Alto, you have Oakland, you have all these different areas that are part of what is the Valley, Redwood, whatever it's called. I don't know too much, but that's what Miami needs to be, is South Florida and more of that ecosystem collaborating.
That's why when people say, where are you from? And I say Miami, and I always add the suburbs piece because there's a pride to it in a way.
Yeah, we're here in Miami Shores, for example. Right?
Yeah.
It's a suburb.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think about, I'm sure you have your stories, but to me, the things that make Miami are Hialeah, Calle Ocho. And I want people to know those places also. Yes. Homestead, Kendall.
Yes, definitely. So. I think everybody that moves here will assess the different neighborhoods and what's important to them. Good schools, if they're looking for a public school, where are the good school districts? What are the amenities in that particular neighborhood? I encourage anybody that is thinking about relocating to Miami to really spend time, not just be like, okay, I want a place at Miami Beach just because it says Miami Beach, right? Or I want a place on the water. There's a lot of places you can get a house on the water in South Florida, right? You can, go in Miami Beach if you have the money for that, or you can go to Fort Lauderdale, for example, right? They have a lot of places on the water there too, and Aventura and everywhere in between. So I would recommend for anybody that's thinking about coming down here, spend a month, rent a place, get an Airbnb, and really explore. It's such a widespread city. It's so sprawled out. It's a double-edged sword. It's a benefit and a negative at the same time. Mm-hmm. But a lot of different flavors. Hialeah, Cayocho is a very special place. You really
Yeah,
gotta
and I'm
figure
not
out-
saying I don't think a Bay Area investor is going to love living in Hialeah. It's
Right.
a whole other right.
Oh, for
I
sure.
more mean like go visit it, go see
Oh,
it,
yeah.
meet the people. These are the things that make Miami really unique.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I if you care about the city and you care about what makes Miami, it's worth spending time in those places. And I would like to see more of the newcomers here
Yeah.
get out of the Miami Beach bubble. you know?
Exactly, because look how cool Miami is, Miami Beach.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like there's two Miamis in a
Oh,
way.
for sure. And I think you and I, as locals, we pride ourselves on the grittier parts of Miami that actually feels more like what our identity is. Like
Yeah.
we never associated with South Beach as Miami, yet that's what 90% of the world, when they think Miami, they think of South Beach, right?
Exactly. And when I go home to Westchester, Miami, not
Yep.
New York, I think, are we doing that great of a job in Miami tech? Because in this neighborhood, no one knows even much. I don't want to say no one, but for the most part,
Yeah.
we're not really reaching other people, and that's how you make equal opportunity. So I
Right.
think about that as well. I don't know what the answer is.
It's
but-
very true. How are we getting the folks in Doral integrated and things like that?
Exactly.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So on that note, I think it's a good tie-in. How can these new transplants, the folks that are relocating to Miami, get involved with Miami Angels and the tech community as a whole? I think you guys are a great entry point into the community for a lot of these folks. So how can they get involved?
Yeah, especially for people who want to invest. So it's a good way to meet other investors, see good deals both locally, get a sense of what's happening in Miami. Then there's also Black Angels Miami, and they also present like LP opportunities. We don't really do that. So if you're interested in that, BAM's great. Then there's, for more like Series A investors, later stage, Function, led by Monica Black. She's amazing. Highly recommend that. It's also a membership organization. We work closely together because we're the early stage, and sometimes our companies graduate and can get to be ready for a Function investment. Refresh Miami, of course, just to keep your finger on the pulse as far as, and they're doing some great journalism coming out
Shout
of there.
out to Nancy, Brian, Maria,
Yeah. Marcella's also writing for
absolutely.
them. Then Austin's weekly Twitter recaps.
That's great. Follow at Bunsen on Twitter.
Yes.
Yeah. Shout out to Austin.
Endeavor, as far as mentoring startups,
Definitely.
and they actually have a very strong Miami focus, so they only work with Miami startups.
Depending on the size of the company, depending on the investors that are bringing in, that's a really great start getting mixed in.
Yeah.
And I think Refresh is doing a great job being that central pipe of information. What are some of the major mistakes you see founders make when they're looking to raise funding? Are they too early, or do you say reach out to us at any point to start the conversation, or what are some red flags that people can learn from?
Yeah, that's interesting. VC is very much relationship building.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with reaching out just to get to know someone, understand the VC or the investor's thesis, to know if you're way too early and be upfront about that and with your ask and all. But it is important, and it looks really good if you get to know them early and they're following and watching your progress. But one thing that I see founders often don't do, which they absolutely should, is ask questions to investors.
Good point.
Do due diligence on investors. I'm not sure why. I think it's just they get so many no's that when someone's interested, you don't want to mess it up. But to me, it's more impressive too when someone's like, I don't know if I want to work with you. And it's true. It's absolutely that way, because everyone has stories of a terrible founder-investor relationship. It's definitely a two-way street. So
don't forget, you're getting in a relationship with this person for what is on average 5 to 7 years.
It's getting closer to 10 now.
There you go. Right. So you really,
much longer than many marriages.
That's right. You really need to do your due diligence.
Yeah,
for sure.
Really, really important. With the wrong investor, I see it time and time again with some of the founders that I mentor, that it just stalls the business when you're getting into legal battle over these things. The type of things you can ask them what their vision is for how they work with the company, right? Because I think as a founder, you want someone who who can help you and be strategic, but at the same time completely trusts you to make your decisions. So that's one. And then the other thing that happens often when, as it relates to pitch decks, is I'll get through the whole deck and I don't know what the company does. So I always say, and this seems so obvious, but I think so many times we're in it. Like it happens with me. I'm working on a presentation and there's something blatant that I'm missing, right?
Right.
It's just the way our minds work. So I always say, have someone who's completely out of tech or what your business does, review it and see if they get it. I mean, as investors, we look at decks often, and so we'll have some knowledge for the most part, but you want to make it so, because we're looking at so many, we're not spending a lot of time on average reviewing them. So it needs to be things that we can pick up really quickly.
Right. Sometimes a founder is so ingrained in what they're doing, they think that's like a given that you'll just get the concept, right? And really,
I see that it's like too much in the details. That it's like you also need to zoom out and explain what the product is.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You mentioned something really important, which is encouraging founders to ask questions back to the investors, right? Can you give me an example of a few questions that would be good, for
so the one that I said about like, how do you work with entrepreneurs? How do you support? And you want to ask open-ended and more like philosophical questions on how they view.
You're not trying to pin them down to anything. You're more so just clarifying their working process and how they interact with their portfolio companies and that kind of stuff, right?
Exactly. Be upfront. Ask them about their process as well. Ask about timing. Ask about if there's certain scenarios you're nervous about. Like if something goes wrong, what has been your role in the past, or how do you see you stepping in at that point? And where are the areas you're strong in? What are some of the areas you're weak in? Because some investors are awesome as far as like operations go. Others are better with helping you fundraise.
Right. Definitely. I also think when I got a few tips when I was raising money for Live Ninja, somebody told me to ask, what phase of the fund
are you in?
Exactly. That was a big one, right? Because if they're at the tail end of that fund, their behavior becomes a lot different. I found that I was working with a particular investor that was on the tail end of the fund, and they were looking to raise their next fund, and they were pushing for some outcomes to happen to better facilitate the story that they were trying to raise through LP money, right?
Exactly.
So that was a big thing, I think, that I learned to start asking. And then the referrals, right? You need to, oftentimes investors will be like, put me in touch with a few people that I can contact for referrals. You need to do that right back to investors.
Yeah.
Can you put me in touch with a few founders? Now, typically, they'll put you in touch with the 2 or 3 portfolio companies that did well. But the ask should be, can you put me in touch with 2 or 3 founders that you invested in where it didn't work out?
Yeah.
Where you had to sunset the company or something. And those testimonies will tell you everything about how the investor behaved. Were they helpful in winding down the company? Were they supportive during those tough times? That's, I think, the real testimonial, right? Because if your company's crushing it, you have a supportive investor the whole way.
Exactly.
But no doubt you're going to be facing some trying times. How did that investor behave, right?
Yeah, looking at their portfolio is so important because some investors have a spray and pray approach.
Right.
So they're not going to spend as much hands-on time with you. And another question is, do you want that as the founder? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. I think something, too, that's underrated sometimes, again, it's the right person, but a new fund manager sometimes has so much more to prove when it's fund one that they're really working hard with you. More than the big name VC is awesome because it helps with recognition for you and the company.
It validates the round. And
so maybe even a balance. But yeah, don't underestimate the new GP.
Nice. That's good advice. We talked a little about the founders. As an investor, what do you specifically look for when reviewing a deck or a pitch from a founder? Are you looking directly at the team? A lot of investors like it's team before anything. Is that a big part for you? Or are you looking more for untapped market opportunity? What are really the things you're honing in on?
So it's funny you ask about like the team and the deck, because I'm not the type of investor that's going to be like, oh, you went to this school, you worked at this company, you're awesome. That doesn't say much to me. I can look at the team by talking to them, by understanding their past, their history. I want to invest in founders that have overcome hardship, that have something in their story that proves to me that they will persevere when time gets tough. I think, you and I have talked about this a lot, how hard it is to start a company.
Yep.
And you really need to have mental stamina. So I care much more about that, because just because something's on your resume, that could have kind of been handed to you, which happens often.
Yep.
So
you could put Dropbox, for example, on your deck. What does that really mean? At the end of the day.
And I don't know how hard you work to work there,
right.
or if a friend it was a shoo-in,
Exactly.
So the team is critical, but the deck doesn't quite tell me that. It's more talking to the founder.
Story that they tell of why they started the company, why is this important to them, right?
Yeah. But then the other things, so untapped market, it's great, but there's also opportunities in markets that are sometimes even well served.
For sure.
But definitely as an investor, because of VC, we're looking for huge markets. So it's understanding the market size and questioning even the assumptions that they make in the deck. The other thing I'm trying to understand just at first pass is the traction. That's something that's often missing from decks. I don't know if it's like pre-product, if it's launched, if it's revenue generating. So that's really important. And then, just what the company does. Those are the big things. What the company does, market, traction, and an understanding of the team.
Right. And then also, like, how much are you raising and why? Sometimes founders like to pick round numbers. We're raising $1 million. We're raising $5 million. Okay, why? Why are you raising that
what is that
amount?
going toward?
Right.
It's really important to understand if it's cash flow or if it's what investors like to see is that you have a growth opportunity and you need it to because you can't execute on that without hiring or spending in some type of strategic way.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the show's called Lessons Via Leaders. It's all about the lessons you've learned along the way, things you wish you knew. So I'm wondering, what are 3 things that you've learned in your role at Miami Angels, becoming an investor, talking to all these entrepreneurs that have stuck with you, or things you might have wished you knew when you first started this role?
So one would be the importance of just the human touch in early stage investing. So it's interesting because a lot of people are intimidated to start because they think, I don't have the financial knowledge background. Emotional intelligence is so much more important than people realize when it comes to this. At the end of the day, what sets you apart as an investor and helps you get in a deal when sometimes it's really tight and people are fighting over it is that founder wants to work with you. So it's being a good human, knowing where you can add value. I said this earlier, but as an investor, in many things in life, you're not going to be good at everything. Focus on something that you're good at and make sure that comes across. I've gotten lucky with the hires I've even made at Miami Angels between Dan and Bruno, but it's really tough to if you have tips around this, I'm all open to it, but it's really tough to interview for and hire for that emotional intelligence because it's not something that can necessarily be taught. It's not super tangible, but it's absolutely critical.
Definitely. I agree. I think this is such a people-driven business at its core, and for me at Live Ninja, I always wanted to bet on people early. Like, you always looked for somebody that was like not a resume. They were a person in front of you that just really wanted the job. And I always hired the people that they weren't the most qualified, but they wanted the job more than anybody else. That was really the guiding light in every hire that I made that really worked out at Live Ninja. The bad hires that I made were the mercenaries versus the missionaries. They were the ones that I worked at Salesforce and now I'm here. I'll probably be gone in another year,
Interesting.
Whenever I bet early on someone and it was clear that person just wanted it more so than any other applicant, it never steered me wrong.
What was made clear to you? Like, how would they make that
clear?
Okay,
so I'll give an example, right? And I'm sorry to put her in the spotlight, but Carolina Leon, she was our first marketing hire at Live Ninja. So we had just raised a little bit of funding, $500,000, part of which was AGP, which became Miami Angels, right? And we had the founding team, and it just got to the point where we needed marketing help. You know, we had built the engineering aspect of the company. We had built an early MVP. We launched the product, and now we needed to scale our user base. So we talked with our investors. So like, I think it's time to make a marketing hire. And we recruited from our network. Basically, we talked internally, and we were referred Carolina. She came through one of our investors. And Carolina was also in a career change. And I think she was in education before, but she was really into tech and marketing, and she really wanted to learn, and she was eager. And at the same time, we had other applicants too. We had, I think, maybe like 15 different applicants. And I interviewed with all of them. And Carolina's approach, when it was during the interview, it just so happened that at Live Ninja, which was a video chat marketplace at the time before we pivoted, there was video profiles, and people would advertise on their profile via video what services they provided. And it just so happened that while she was interviewing, we were at our office filming one of those videos. And she saw that, and like, she just like in the middle of the interview process, just like jumped in and got like really hands-on. She's like, you know, what's a good idea? We should do the video this way. And then, you know, maybe we should highlight this, etc. And it was just clear that she was someone that took initiative, and that she was just enthusiastic. Like, you can't fake the enthusiasm and the energy that comes with something.
True.
And everybody else, it was like a kind of like a stuffy like interview process. It was like, I want to do this, and you know, CAC and LTV and and you know, HubSpot, blah blah blah. But there was just like this energy around Carolina that it was clear that she was just stoked on the opportunity, and that she would be the type of person that would work through any challenge, and whatever she didn't know, she would be willing to learn it. And I think that's what you're looking for, that willingness to learn and all that.
And accept the things you don't know.
100%.
And being genuine.
Yes.
That's huge.
Yes. Like, I'll give the examples. Emilio, I didn't hire Emilio, but he was my co-founder. He's one of my favorite people to work with ever, because every time I'd ask Emilio for something technical, can you do this? He'd always say the same thing and be like, I don't know how to do that, but I can learn how to do it.
That's really cool.
Right. And he would literally, like, a week later, he'd go into like a Stack Overflow rabbit hole trying to figure out how to code this thing and hobble together, and he'd come out with a working prototype. You know, so that's the type of thing in any candidate.
A willingness to figure things out.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the honesty of saying what you don't know, right?
That's a huge for me with founders. It's always another piece of advice is if an investor asks you a question that you're not sure of, I much prefer you say, I'm not sure about that. Let me get back to you. 100%. I do not judge a founder negatively for that, because I don't expect them to know every single answer. And you can always tell if someone's making something up. Correct.
That's a great point. That shows also, I think, to the investor, this is a collaborative relationship that we could have, right? It shows that, and investors, there's like a Fred Wilson quote that it's like, I hope I don't butcher this, but it's like, if you're looking for advice, ask for money. If you're looking for money, ask for advice.
Yeah.
And I find that to be really true. Like, if I'm trying to raise money from an investor, I probably want to go to that investor early and like ask for insight on how they would approach this market or this business, versus like, hey, I'm raising $2 million. Would you consider investing? Right.
Yeah.
And then flip side, if you're asking for money, you'll probably get advice instead, you know? So you might as well know that, you know, kind of going into it. So.
I actually have a story for you that just came to me while we were talking, and I don't think I've ever told you this.
Tell me, please.
One of my biggest regrets at Miami Angels on deals that I missed was a founder that you recommended to me.
Oh, yeah?
Do you know who this is?
Oh, wow.
She was one of the ones that I think the reason still to this day that I saw something in her, but she was really tough. She asked hard questions. No, we invested in
Okay,
Max.
Good.
Yeah. You probably don't remember, but Carewell, Bianca Padilla.
Oh my God, I missed on Bianca. Like, again, I wish I would have invested in her too. She's such a rock star.
I don't think maybe she does, because I email her every couple months. Please, Bianca, let us in.
Yeah. She's amazing.
She's so. I mean, they're doing incredibly well.
Yep.
And I saw it at the beginning, and I was just so impressed by her.
Yeah.
And that's one that we missed.
Yeah. she also, so funny story with Bianca. And Bianca, if you're listening, shout out to you and everything you've done. So we hired her. She was a WinCode student. That's how we met her. She was graduated from WinCode in that cohort. Mm-hmm. And Emilio was going out. He wanted 2 new hires. So he went down to WinCode and he said, we're going to pick 2 hires. And he came back. And Emilio, by the way, this was the first junior hires that we had ever made, junior developers. So he was a little bit skeptical.
Okay.
He came back from WinCode after the interviews. They did like a round, like kind of like a speed round interviews. He came back. He's like, bro, there's this candidate. Whatever we do, we need to hire her. We need to hire her. She's an absolute rock star. I go, what is it about her? She's like, there's just something.
Yeah, it's hard to put your finger on.
Exactly. There's just something about her.
Yeah.
He goes like, she doesn't know everything yet, but no matter what, I know she'll crush it for us, you know?
And she's doing that. Big shout out to you, Bianca.
Absolutely. So Bianca came in and she did the interview and Emilio was like, give her the pitch on Live Ninja and all that stuff. And it was like one of those where the talent when you see it, it's like, okay, she's not applying for this job. I'm pitching her to accept this role. And
she has a way of doing that.
It was clear that this was a very temporary hire, that she will be doing her own thing very shortly.
And it was like a year, right?
We were very lucky to have her for, I think, a little under a year, maybe.
Yeah.
And then she was like, she invited me for coffee. She told me, she's like, I'm sorry, but I have to give my notice. And she said it as flattering. She goes, I want to do what you're doing. I want to build a company,
Yeah, so then I think you recommended her to us.
It was called something
Care
else.
Club.
Care Club, yeah, exactly.
And that was back in 2017, but we lost her to Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we'll get her back.
That's right. That's right. Amazing things happening in Charlotte too. I hear that ecosystem's great. I visit there quite often. Beautiful city.
I've heard it about Atlanta too.
Yeah, Charlotte and Atlanta kind of remind me very similar markets. So definitely shout out to Bianca. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing. I get a little bit emotional just thinking about that stuff too. We talked about the learnings from Miami Angels, but this year, 2020, has been such a crazy, nutty year. I'm wondering, what are some of your biggest learnings from this year? Like, what is 2020? We're wrapping it up, thank God. We're almost done with it. But what are some of the things that'll stick with you?
It's funny because we're all like, oh, thank God 2020. And it's like, we still kind of have a long journey in 2021.
That's true.
I love all the memes of like 2021.
Yep.
But okay, so it's funny. Back in March, it felt like the apocalypse in the world, right? And that was all because of the uncertainty. And everyone's like, what's going to happen with VC? Well, it's been like an incredible year in VC, right? So just knowing that our minds go to the worst case scenario, you should plan for it. But it's not always that way. And I think we all could have saved ourselves a lot of anxiety and heartache if we weren't ruminating in those worst case scenario thoughts. So that's, I would say, plan for the worst and then let it be, because I spent a lot of time thinking through so many different scenarios, changing every little detail. You just kind of have to you can't control everything to some point. So that's something I learned. It's okay if you don't know things, and then take calculated risks. That was a big reminder I had this year. We had to move things really quickly. We've always been like an in-person organization too. And it's gone incredibly well. And we've learned things that if we were never forced to do some of these changes, we would have never do. And the truth is that our organization is going to be different. It's a before and after 2020.
And embrace that, right?
Exactly.
Embrace that.
An example is that, so our pitch nights were in person in different locations, but really in downtown Miami.
It used to be in Venture Hive, I remember. That's what I used to pitch.
We would do it there. We would switch between the lab in Wynwood. We would do Building Co. in Brickell. We would do a spot in Coral Gables. And what I realized, so it was from 5:30 to 7 on Monday evening. So Miami traffic. We were, without realizing, inadvertently, we were creating barriers for women and people with young kids to really participate and join. So we've had a lot more women join than ever before this year. So that's been really cool. And it's so many people, it's gone easier. And I think one thing that's cool about our angel group too is it's pretty young and vibrant. It's not the typical retiree angel group. So it's a lot easier for people that are raising kids to be able to come.
Yeah,
so.
definitely. It's opened up a lot of opportunities for folks that, like you said, you're talking to companies that are not even in Miami now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the pandemic and because it's, shifted the way that you let companies in and things like that, right? And that's been better, right? You've seen more opportunities, more deal flow, more investors, because like you said, 5 to 7 o'clock, that's dinner and bath time. So the fact that you're now doing these things remotely opens up the door for a lot of folks to participate, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know I can't do anything between 6 and 8 p.m., because of the kids and all that stuff that I got to do. So
yeah. So, and that's not to say that we're never going to go back to in person. There's a ton of value there, but it's just rethinking how we do things in the future in a way that makes that we're not stopping people from participating.
Yeah, like you said, maybe there's a hybrid model where the founder's pitching at the lab, they're wearing a lapel mic, and they're broadcasting out to 30 people that are on the Zoom call, and they can take questions from in-person audience, and then, okay, anybody on the Zoom have a question, right? So that's the world I think we're heading in.
Yeah.
Cool. So where can folks find you? How could they, first of all, as an investor, how could folks apply to be part of the Miami Angels network? And entrepreneurs, how could they pitch you?
So 2 ways is both founders and investors email us hello@miamiangels.vc. So not .com, it's .vc. Like we talked about a lot, we monitor our cold emails, so reach out to us. If you're a founder, in that email, send us your deck. It's really important. And tell us a little bit about your company and why you're looking for investment. Send a well thought out email. The other way that you can connect is very active on Twitter. So very easy. My handle is Rebecca Danta. And then the Miami Angels account is Miami Angels VC.
Awesome. So yeah, anybody listening, please reach out to Rebecca. I can speak from personal experience. I worked with Miami Angels. You guys invested in Live Ninja, and the folks that came through that syndicated investment were some of the best, most helpful investors that we had, so big shout out to you guys, and keep doing what you're doing. We'll drop all of Rebecca's information in the show notes so you can reach out to her. And Rebecca, thank you for joining the show.
Thank you.